The invisible threshold, where sound becomes feeling welcome. Pause for a moment. Close your eyes and breathe deeply. Right now, in this very instant, your body is detecting something extraordinary. All around you, beneath the range of human hearing, vibrations move through the air like invisible rivers, flowing through an unseen landscape. These frequencies exist in a realm beyond what your ears can perceive, yet your entire being responds to them with profound intensity. Your heart quickens, your skin tingles. A sense of presence fills the room, but nothing has changed in what you can hear. Nothing visible has altered, yet everything has shifted within you. This is the world of infrasound, frequencies so low that they escape the threshold of human auditory perception. While your ears are designed to detect sounds ranging from approximately 20 Hz to 20,000 Hz, infrasound operates below that lower boundary, vibrating at frequencies below 20 Hz. These are the tremors that pass through you like thoughts through consciousness, felt rather than heard, experienced rather than understood. They shape your emotional landscape in ways that science is only beginning to comprehend, creating sensations of unease, fear, wonder, and transcendence without your conscious awareness. The human experience of sound is far more complex than we typically imagine. When we think of hearing, we envision sound waves traveling through air and entering our ears, where they are converted into electrical signals that our brain interprets as music, speech, or environmental noise. But this is only the surface of a much deeper reality. Sound is vibration, and vibration is fundamental to how we perceive and interact with our world. Below the threshold of conscious hearing lies an entire spectrum of sensation that your body receives through mechanisms far more subtle and pervasive than your ears alone. Consider the architecture of your own body, your skeleton, your organs, your tissues. All of these are capable of vibrating in resonance with frequencies that your ears cannot detect. When infrasound passes through your environment, it does not simply disappear unnoticed. Instead, it moves through your physical form, setting your body into sympathetic vibration. Your chest cavity resonates, your organs oscillate gently, your nervous system receives signals of movement and change that register as emotional and psychological responses. You feel something, though you cannot name what it is. You sense a presence, though nothing visible has appeared. You experience fear or awe, though there is no logical reason for these feelings to arise. This threshold between sound and non-sound, between hearing and feeling, is where one of nature's most fascinating mysteries resides. Throughout human history, people have attributed the strange sensations they experience in certain locations to supernatural phenomena. Ghosts, spirits, and otherworldly presences have been blamed for the inexplicable fear that grips visitors to ancient castles, the profound unease that settles over individuals in certain rooms, the sense of being watched when alone in a space that should offer only solitude. Yet modern science is revealing that many of these experiences may not be supernatural at all. They may be the result of infrasound, vibrations so low that they operate below the threshold of conscious perception, yet powerful enough to reshape your emotional and psychological state. The discovery that infrasound plays a role in human perception and emotion represents a paradigm shift in how we understand the relationship between our physical environment and our inner experience. It suggests that we are far more sensitive to our surroundings than we realize, that our bodies are constantly receiving information through channels we have not traditionally recognized as valid sources of sensation. We are not merely visual creatures, not merely auditory beings. We are resonating instruments, responding to the subtle vibrations that permeate our world, whether we are conscious of them or not. Before we begin this exploration into the invisible world of infrasound, I invite you to subscribe to the Relaxing Science channel. Give this video a like and share with us your location and the current time where you are. This helps us understand who you are and where you are experiencing this journey with us. As we move deeper into this exploration, you may find yourself becoming more aware of the vibrations around you, more attuned to the subtle sensations that your body is constantly receiving. You may begin to understand why certain spaces feel different, why some rooms carry an emotional weight that seems to have no logical source, and why the boundary between the physical and the psychological is far more permeable than we have traditionally believed. What we are about to explore together is not merely science, though it is rooted firmly in the principles of physics and neuroscience. It is also an invitation to a deeper relationship with your own body, with your environment, and with the mysterious ways that the material world shapes your inner experience. Throughout this journey, we will move from the purely physical, the mechanics of how infrasound travels and how your body detects it, into the realm of neuroscience, exploring how low frequencies trigger emotional responses in your brain. We will visit ancient castles and modern concert halls, discovering how architecture itself can become a generator of infrasound. We will contemplate the philosophical implications of a world filled with vibrations that we cannot hear but can profoundly feel. The invisible threshold that separates sound from sensation, hearing from feeling, is also the threshold that separates the known from the mysterious. On one side lies the familiar world of audible sound, the music and speech and environmental noise that we consciously process every moment of our lives. On the other side lies a vast realm of vibration that exists just beyond the edge of our awareness, shaping our emotions, influencing our thoughts, and creating experiences that we struggle to explain or understand. By crossing this threshold together, by exploring the science and the mystery of infrasound, we begin to awaken to a fuller, richer understanding of what it means to be human in a world filled with vibrations we feel but do not hear. The architecture of vibration. How your body detects what ears cannot hear. The human body is a magnificent instrument of perception, far more sophisticated than most people realize. While we tend to think of our senses as distinct channels, sight, hearing, touch, smell, taste, the reality is far more integrated and nuanced. Your body is not simply a passive receiver of information from your environment. Rather, it is an active participant in a continuous dialogue with the world around you, detecting and responding to signals that operate at scales and frequencies beyond the reach of conscious awareness. When we consider how sound works, we typically focus on the ear as the primary sensory organ. The ear is indeed remarkable, with its delicate structures of bone and fluid and hair cells designed to detect minute vibrations in the air. Sound waves enter the ear canal, causing the eardrum to vibrate. These vibrations are transmitted through the tiny bones of the middle ear, the hammer, anvil, and stirrup, which amplify the signal. The vibrations then travel into the inner ear, where they set fluid in motion within the cochlea, a spiral-shaped structure filled with specialized sensory cells. These hair cells bend in response to the fluid movement, generating electrical signals that travel along the auditory nerve to the brain, where they are interpreted as sound. But this is only one pathway through which your body detects vibration. Your entire physical form is capable of resonating with frequencies, including those below the threshold of conscious hearing. Your skeleton is a framework of bone, a material that conducts vibration efficiently. Your organs, your heart, your lungs, your stomach, are soft tissues that can vibrate in response to environmental frequencies. Your muscles, your skin, your nervous system, all of these are capable of detecting and responding to vibrations that your ears cannot hear. Consider the physics of resonance. Every object has a natural frequency at which it vibrates most easily. A tuning fork struck gently produces a specific pitch because the metal vibrates at a particular frequency. A string on a guitar, when plucked, vibrates at frequencies determined by its length, tension, and material composition. Your body, too, has natural frequencies. Different organs resonate at different frequencies. Your chest cavity, for instance, has a resonant frequency somewhere in the range of 5 to 7 Hz. Your heart, your lungs, your abdominal cavity, each has its own characteristic frequency at which it prefers to vibrate. When infrasound passes through your environment, it can excite these natural resonances in your body. If the frequency of the infrasound matches the resonant frequency of your chest cavity, your entire torso can begin to vibrate in sympathy. You may not hear this as sound, but you feel it as a sensation, a trembling, a pressure, a sense of something moving within you. Your organs oscillate gently, and your nervous system registers these movements as signals of change and potential threat. The vagus nerve, one of the longest and most important nerves in your body, plays a crucial role in this process. This nerve extends from your brain down through your neck, chest and abdomen, connecting to your heart, lungs and digestive system. The vagus nerve is sensitive to vibrations and movements within your body. When infrasound causes your organs to vibrate, the vagus nerve detects these movements and sends signals to your brain. These signals do not arrive as auditory information. Your brain does not interpret them as sound. Instead, they arrive as visceral sensations, as emotional states, as a sense of presence or threat or wonder. Your nervous system is exquisitely tuned to detect threat and opportunity in your environment. Throughout human evolution, our ancestors developed sophisticated systems for detecting danger. A rustling in the bushes might indicate a predator. A distant rumble might signal an approaching storm. These were threats that could mean the difference between survival and death. Your nervous system developed to be highly sensitive to subtle signals of change and potential danger in the environment. Infrasound in this evolutionary context may trigger ancient warning systems in your nervous system. Low-frequency vibrations are associated with large-scale environmental events, earthquakes, avalanches, severe weather, the movement of large animals. Your body may interpret infrasound as a signal that something large and potentially dangerous is present, even though consciously you perceive nothing unusual. Your heart rate increases, your breathing becomes shallow, your muscles tense in preparation for fight or flight. All of this happens below the level of conscious awareness, triggered by vibrations you cannot hear. The process by which your body detects infrasound involves multiple sensory pathways working in concert. Your inner ear, while primarily designed to detect audible frequencies, can still respond to very low frequencies through the movement of fluid in the cochlea. Additionally, your body contains specialized sensory receptors called mechanoreceptors, which are sensitive to pressure and vibration. These receptors are distributed throughout your skin, your muscles, and your internal organs. They can detect vibrations even at very low frequencies, sending signals to your nervous system about the movement and pressure changes occurring in your body. The semicircular canals in your inner ear, which are primarily responsible for balance and spatial orientation, can also respond to infrasound. These structures contain fluid and specialized hair cells that detect movement and changes in orientation. When infrasound vibrates your body, it can affect the fluid in these canals, sending signals to your brain about movement and spatial positioning. Your brain may interpret these signals as indicating that you are moving or that your spatial orientation has changed, even though you are standing perfectly still. Furthermore, your skin itself is a sensitive detector of vibration. The dermis, the layer of skin beneath the surface, contains numerous sensory receptors that respond to pressure and vibration. When infrasound passes through your body, your skin vibrates along with your internal structures. These skin receptors detect this vibration and send signals to your brain. Your brain processes these signals as tactile sensations, a tingling, a prickling, a sense of something moving across your skin, though nothing physical has touched you. The architecture of vibration detection in your body is thus far more complex and sophisticated than the simple model of sound entering your ear and being converted to electrical signals in your brain. Your entire body is a sensory organ, capable of detecting vibrations at frequencies far below what your conscious hearing can perceive. This distributed system of detection means that infrasound affects you in ways that are difficult to localize or explain. You cannot point to your ear and say that is where you are sensing the infrasound, because the sensation is arriving through multiple pathways simultaneously, through your organs, your muscles, your skin, your nervous system. The result is a diffuse, pervasive sense of something happening, something changing, something present in your environment, yet nothing you can clearly identify or describe. Ancient stones and whispered fears. Infrasound in historic castles and sacred spaces. Throughout human history, certain places have been regarded as haunted, as places where spirits dwell and supernatural events occur. Ancient castles perched on windswept cliffs, medieval monasteries hidden in remote valleys, burial grounds surrounded by standing stones. These locations have accumulated stories of ghostly apparitions, unexplained sounds, and overwhelming sensations of dread or awe. Visitors to these places report experiences that defy rational explanation. They feel watched when alone in empty chambers. They hear whispers and footsteps when no one else is present. They experience profound fear or, conversely, transcendent peace, without any obvious source for these emotional states. For centuries, these experiences were attributed to the supernatural. Ghosts, spirits, and otherworldly beings were invoked to explain the inexplicable sensations that people experienced in these locations. But modern science is revealing a far more intriguing explanation. The architecture of these ancient spaces, combined with natural environmental factors, may be generating infrasound, vibrations that operate below the threshold of human hearing, yet powerful enough to profoundly affect human emotion and perception. Consider the architecture of a medieval castle. These structures were built with thick stone walls, massive stone arches, and cavernous chambers designed to intimidate and impress. The stone itself is a material that conducts vibration efficiently. When wind passes over and around a castle, it creates complex patterns of air movement. These wind currents can set the stones themselves into vibration. As the wind moves around the castle's towers and through its corridors, it can generate pressure waves that resonate within the structure. Some of these pressure waves, particularly those created by large-scale wind patterns or by wind passing over irregular surfaces, can be in the infrasound range. The resonant properties of the castle's architecture amplify these infrasound vibrations. The large chambers and corridors act as resonance chambers, similar to the body of a guitar or violin. When infrasound enters these spaces, it can build up, reinforcing certain frequencies while dampening others. The result is that infrasound levels within the castle may be significantly higher than in the surrounding environment. Visitors walking through these chambers are exposed to these amplified infrasound vibrations, which trigger the physiological and psychological responses we have described. The effect is particularly pronounced in certain architectural spaces. A long corridor with stone walls creates a confined space in which infrasound can build up. A circular chamber, such as a tower room, creates resonance patterns that amplify certain frequencies. A vaulted ceiling, particularly one with irregular surfaces, can scatter infrasound in complex patterns that fill the space with overlapping vibrations. These architectural features, which were designed for practical reasons, to create defensible spaces, to impress visitors, to accommodate large gatherings, inadvertently create ideal conditions for the generation and amplification of infrasound. Sacred spaces present a particularly fascinating case study in how architecture and infrasound interact to create powerful emotional and spiritual experiences. Many ancient temples, cathedrals, and places of worship were constructed with architectural features that, we now understand, generate significant infrasound. The massive stone structures, the vaulted ceilings, the large interior spaces, all of these contribute to the generation and amplification of infrasound. Additionally, many of these spaces incorporated natural features, such as caves or locations near geological formations that naturally generate infrasound. The experience of visiting these sacred spaces is often described in deeply spiritual terms. People report feeling the presence of the divine, experiencing transcendent peace, or sensing something profoundly meaningful in these locations. They may attribute these experiences to the sacred nature of the space, to the presence of spiritual energy, or to their own faith and devotion. But infrasound may play a significant role in generating these emotional and psychological states. The low-frequency vibrations resonate with your body, triggering feelings of awe and transcendence, creating a sense of connection to something larger than yourself. This raises a profound question about the nature of spiritual experience. If infrasound can trigger feelings of awe, transcendence, and connection to the divine, does this mean that spiritual experiences are merely the result of physical vibrations? Or does it suggest that the divine works through the material world, using the vibrations of the earth itself as a medium through which spiritual truth is communicated? These are philosophical questions that science cannot answer, but they arise naturally when we begin to understand the role that infrasound plays in shaping our deepest experiences. The infrasonic signature of specific locations. Different castles and sacred spaces generate infrasound at different frequencies and intensities, depending on their specific architectural features and environmental conditions. Edinburgh Castle, perched on a volcanic rock formation in Scotland, generates infrasound through the interaction of wind with its stone walls and the natural vibrations of the rock formation itself. Visitors to Edinburgh Castle frequently report experiencing overwhelming sensations of dread and unease in certain chambers, particularly in the dungeons and lower levels of the structure. The infrasound generated in these spaces resonates with the natural frequencies of the human body, particularly the chest cavity, creating sensations that visitors interpret as ghostly presences or supernatural threats. Stonehenge, the ancient stone circle on Salisbury Plain in England, generates infrasound through the interaction of wind with the standing stones. The stones themselves, massive blocks of rock arranged in a geometric pattern, create complex patterns of wind flow. As wind passes around and between the stones, it generates pressure waves. Some of these waves fall into the infrasound range. The open-air setting of Stonehenge means that infrasound levels may be lower than in enclosed spaces like castles, but the effect is still significant. Visitors to Stonehenge report feeling a sense of presence, of ancient power, of connection to something beyond ordinary understanding. The Great Pyramid of Giza, constructed with massive stone blocks and internal chambers, generates infrasound through its architectural structure. The King's Chamber, located deep within the pyramid, has particular resonant properties that amplify certain low frequencies. Visitors to the pyramid's internal chambers report experiencing profound emotional states. Some describe feelings of transcendence and spiritual awakening, while others report overwhelming anxiety and a sense of oppressive presence. These varied responses may reflect differences in individual sensitivity to infrasound, as well as differences in how individual nervous systems interpret the same physical vibrations. The role of natural infrasound sources. Beyond the infrasound generated by architectural features, many ancient castles and sacred spaces are located in environments that naturally generate infrasound. Geological formations, particularly those involving water movement, can generate significant infrasound. Waterfalls produce infrasound through the impact of falling water and the turbulent movement of water in pools below the falls. Underground rivers and streams create infrasound through the movement of water through rock formations. These natural sources of infrasound add to the infrasound generated by the architectural features of castles and temples, creating environments saturated with low-frequency vibrations. Additionally, many ancient sacred sites were located in places where the earth itself generates infrasound. Volcanic regions, areas with significant geological faulting, and places where underground water movement is pronounced all generate infrasound through natural processes. The ancients, while they did not understand the physics of infrasound, may have recognized that certain locations felt spiritually significant or powerful. They may have built temples and sacred spaces in these locations precisely because they sensed something unusual about them, something that affected their emotional and psychological state. The infrasound generated by the geological features of these locations may have been the physical basis for the spiritual significance attributed to them. The neuroscience of unease. How low frequencies trigger emotional responses. Your brain is the most complex structure in the known universe, containing approximately 86 billion neurons, each connected to thousands of other neurons through synaptic connections. These neurons communicate through the transmission of chemical and electrical signals, creating patterns of activity that generate consciousness, thought, emotion, and sensation. The way your brain processes information about your environment determines how you feel and how you respond to what you perceive. When infrasound passes through your body, it triggers neural activity in specific regions of your brain, generating emotional responses that seem to arise without any conscious cause. The amygdala is a small almond-shaped structure located deep within your brain, in the medial temporal lobe. This structure plays a crucial role in processing emotions, particularly fear and threat detection. Your amygdala is exquisitely tuned to detect signals of danger in your environment. When you perceive a threat, whether it is real or imagined, your amygdala becomes activated, triggering a cascade of physiological responses designed to prepare your body for action. Your heart rate increases, your breathing becomes faster and shallower, your muscles tense. Stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol are released into your bloodstream. All of this happens in milliseconds, often before your conscious mind even registers that you have perceived a threat. When infrasound passes through your body, it can activate your amygdala without any conscious perception of a threat. The low-frequency vibrations detected by your vagus nerve and other sensory pathways are interpreted by your amygdala as signals of potential danger. Your amygdala does not process this information consciously. It does not think, there is infrasound present, therefore I should be afraid. Rather, it responds to the pattern of sensory input, recognizing it as similar to patterns that historically have been associated with threat. The result is that you experience fear or unease without knowing why. This automatic, unconscious processing of threat is an evolutionary adaptation. Throughout human history, the ability to quickly detect and respond to danger has been essential for survival. Your ancestors, who could sense a predator's presence before consciously seeing it, who could feel an approaching storm before seeing dark clouds, who could detect the rumbling of an earthquake before the ground began to shake. These individuals were more likely to survive and pass on their genes. Your brain, therefore, evolved to be highly sensitive to subtle signals of environmental change and potential threat, even signals that operate below the threshold of conscious awareness. Infrasound, from an evolutionary perspective, would have been associated with large-scale environmental events and the presence of large animals. The low-frequency vibrations generated by a distant earthquake, by severe weather, by a large predator moving through the landscape, these would have been real threats to human survival. Your brain's threat detection systems evolved to be sensitive to these low-frequency signals. In the modern world, when you are exposed to infrasound in a castle or other enclosed space, your amygdala responds as if you are in the presence of a threat, even though consciously you perceive no danger. The insula is another brain region that plays a crucial role in how you respond to infrasound. The insula, located at the junction between your temporal and frontal lobes, is involved in processing interoceptive sensations, signals from your body about its internal state. When infrasound causes your organs to vibrate, these vibrations are detected by sensory receptors throughout your body. Signals about these vibrations travel to your insula, where they are integrated and processed. Your insula generates a sense of what is happening inside your body, a feeling of your body's state. When infrasound causes your organs to vibrate in unusual ways, your insula detects these unusual vibrations and generates an unusual feeling, a sense of something wrong, something unusual, something not quite right. The anterior cingulate cortex, located in the frontal lobe of your brain, is involved in processing emotional information and in integrating emotional and cognitive information. When your amygdala detects a threat and your insula detects unusual bodily sensations, your anterior cingulate cortex processes this information in the context of your conscious understanding of the situation. If you are standing in a room in which you consciously perceive no threat, yet your amygdala is activated and your insula is detecting unusual bodily sensations, a mismatch occurs between your conscious understanding and your emotional response. Your anterior cingulate cortex attempts to resolve this mismatch, searching for an explanation for why you feel afraid or uneasy when there is no obvious reason. This mismatch between conscious understanding and emotional response may explain why people in infrasound-filled environments often report experiences that seem irrational or supernatural. You feel afraid, so your brain searches for a reason for this fear. Finding no logical explanation in your immediate environment, your brain may generate an explanation that incorporates elements of folklore, cultural belief, or imagination. You may think you sense a ghostly presence or that something supernatural is occurring, not because you have actually perceived anything supernatural, but because your brain is attempting to make sense of emotional and physical sensations that have no obvious conscious cause. The insula and the feeling of presence. One of the most remarkable effects of infrasound on the brain involves a phenomenon called the feeling of presence, a sense that another being is present in the room with you, even though you can see no one and hear nothing. This phenomenon has been reported by people in infrasound-filled environments, by patients with certain neurological conditions, and by individuals in sensory deprivation experiments. The feeling of presence is one of the most uncanny and disturbing experiences a person can have, yet it may have a straightforward neurological explanation involving infrasound and the insula. When infrasound causes vibrations in your body that are unusual or unexpected, your insula detects these vibrations and generates an unusual feeling about your body's state. This feeling is not consciously processed as "my organs are vibrating at an unusual frequency." Rather, it is experienced as a vague, undefined sense of something being different, something being wrong, something being present that should not be present. Your brain, searching for an explanation for this unusual feeling, may interpret it as the presence of another being. After all, if you feel something unusual happening in your body and you cannot identify the source of this feeling, one possible explanation is that something external, another person or being, is affecting you in some way. The phenomenon of sensing a presence has been studied extensively by neuroscientists investigating out-of-body experiences and altered states of consciousness. Researchers have found that stimulating certain areas of the brain, particularly the temporoparietal junction and the posterior insula, can trigger the feeling of a presence in the room. These are the same brain regions that integrate information about your body's location in space and about the boundaries between your own body and the external world. When these regions are stimulated in unusual ways, the boundary between self and other becomes blurred, and you may sense the presence of another being. Infrasound may trigger the feeling of presence by affecting the normal functioning of these brain regions. The vibrations caused by infrasound travel through your body and are detected by sensory receptors throughout your body. Signals about these vibrations are sent to your brain, where they are processed by the insula and related structures. If these signals are unusual or unexpected, they may disrupt the normal integration of information about your body's boundaries and location in space. The result is a blurred sense of where your body ends and the external world begins, and a corresponding feeling that something other than yourself is present in your immediate vicinity. The role of the default mode network. Your brain's default mode network is a set of brain regions that become active when you are not focused on a specific external task. This network includes the medial prefrontal cortex, the posterior cingulate cortex, and the medial temporal lobes. When your default mode network is active, you are engaged in self-referential thinking, thinking about yourself, your past experiences, your future plans, and your sense of identity. The default mode network is also involved in generating a sense of self, a coherent narrative about who you are and how you fit into the world. Infrasound can disrupt the normal functioning of your default mode network. When unusual sensory signals from infrasound reach your brain, they can interfere with the normal processing of self-referential information. Your sense of self may become destabilized, and you may experience a sense of separation from your body or from your surroundings. This disruption of the default mode network may contribute to the uncanny, otherworldly quality of experiences in infrasound-filled environments. You may feel as though you are not quite yourself, as though something has shifted in your perception of reality or your sense of identity. Concert halls and accidental mysteries. When music venues become infrasound chambers, music has the power to move us profoundly. A beautiful melody can bring tears to our eyes. A powerful chord progression can send shivers down our spine. A rhythmic beat can make us want to move our bodies. We typically attribute these emotional responses to the aesthetic qualities of the music, to the beauty of the melodies, the complexity of the harmonies, the expressiveness of the performance. But the emotional power of music is not solely a product of these conscious aesthetic experiences. It also depends on the physical vibrations that the music generates, including vibrations in the infrasound range that we cannot consciously hear. Concert halls are architectural spaces designed to optimize the acoustic properties of music. The size and shape of the hall, the materials used in its construction, the placement of the stage and the seating, all of these factors are carefully considered to create an optimal acoustic environment. The goal is to allow the sound of the instruments and voices on stage to travel throughout the hall with good clarity and appropriate volume levels. But concert halls, in their effort to create optimal acoustic conditions for audible sound, inadvertently create conditions that also generate and amplify infrasound. When a large orchestra performs, the instruments generate vibrations across a wide range of frequencies. The bass instruments, the cellos, the basses, the tubas, the timpani, generate particularly low frequencies. While these instruments are designed to produce audible notes, the vibrations they generate extend below the range of conscious hearing. A cello string vibrating to produce a low note generates not only the fundamental frequency of that note, but also harmonics and overtones at higher frequencies and subharmonics at lower frequencies. Some of these subharmonics fall into the infrasound range. The concert hall's architecture amplifies these low frequencies. The large interior volume of the hall acts as a resonance chamber for low-frequency vibrations. The hard surfaces, the stone or concrete walls, the wooden floors and ceilings, reflect these vibrations rather than absorbing them. The result is that infrasound generated by the orchestra builds up in the hall, creating high levels of infrasound exposure for the audience. Unlike a recording studio or a listening room at home, where infrasound levels may be relatively low, a concert hall can be saturated with infrasound during a performance. The experience of attending a live orchestra performance is often described as profoundly moving, as creating an emotional impact that listening to the same music on a recording does not produce. People report feeling the music, not just hearing it, feeling vibrations moving through their body, experiencing a sense of connection to the performers and to the other audience members. They may attribute this emotional impact to the live nature of the performance, to the presence of the musicians, to the superior acoustic quality of the hall. All of these factors certainly play a role. But the infrasound generated by the orchestra and amplified by the hall's architecture is also a significant contributor to the emotional impact of the experience. Organ music presents a particularly interesting case of infrasound in concert halls. Pipe organs, particularly large organs in cathedrals and concert halls, can generate extremely low frequencies. The largest pipes in a pipe organ can produce notes at frequencies of 8 Hz or lower, well into the infrasound range. While the fundamental frequencies of the notes played on the organ are generally audible, the vibrations generated by these enormous pipes extend into the infrasound range. When a large organ is played, the entire building resonates with these low frequencies. The floor vibrates, the walls vibrate, the air itself seems to vibrate. The audience does not merely hear the organ music, they feel it, experiencing vibrations that seem to move through their entire being. The emotional and spiritual impact of organ music in a cathedral or concert hall may be partly explained by the infrasound generated by the instrument. The low-frequency vibrations resonate with the natural frequencies of the human body, particularly the chest cavity and the heart. These vibrations can trigger profound emotional responses, creating a sense of awe and transcendence that may be interpreted as spiritual experience. The fact that the infrasound is generated by an instrument associated with religious music in a space associated with religious practice may reinforce the interpretation of these experiences as spiritual in nature. The physics of infrasound in concert halls. The generation of infrasound in concert halls can be understood through the principles of physics. When a string on a cello or a bass vibrates, it generates a fundamental frequency corresponding to the pitch of the note being played. But the string does not vibrate in a simple sinusoidal pattern. Instead, it vibrates in a complex pattern that includes the fundamental frequency plus a series of harmonics, overtones that vibrate at integer multiples of the fundamental frequency. A string vibrating at 100 Hz, for example, generates harmonics at 200 Hz, 300 Hz, 400 Hz, and so on. Additionally, the string generates subharmonics, frequencies that are integer fractions of the fundamental frequency. A string vibrating at 100 Hz may also generate subharmonics at 50 Hz, 33.3 Hz, 25 Hz, and lower. Some of these subharmonics fall into the infrasound range. When multiple instruments in an orchestra play simultaneously, their subharmonics overlap and interact, creating complex patterns of low-frequency vibrations. The concert hall's acoustic properties determine how these low frequencies are transmitted and amplified. Hard reflective surfaces reflect low-frequency vibrations rather than absorbing them. This means that infrasound bounces around the hall, building up in intensity as more and more reflections occur. Soft, absorbent surfaces, by contrast, absorb low frequencies, preventing them from building up. Concert halls typically use a combination of both types of surfaces, but the emphasis is usually on reflective surfaces to allow the sound to travel throughout the hall. This means that infrasound tends to build up rather than diminish. The size and shape of the concert hall affect which frequencies are amplified. A large hall has a long reverberation time for low frequencies, meaning that low-frequency vibrations bounce around the hall for a long time before dissipating. Certain frequencies may be amplified more than others, depending on the specific dimensions of the hall. A frequency that corresponds to a wavelength that fits neatly into the dimensions of the hall will be amplified more than a frequency that does not fit as well. This is why different concert halls have different acoustic characteristics, and why the same orchestra may sound different in different venues. The audience's experience of infrasound. The audience members sitting in the concert hall are exposed to high levels of infrasound during a performance. This infrasound passes through their bodies, causing their organs to vibrate in resonance with the low frequencies being generated by the orchestra. The experience of feeling the music, of experiencing vibrations moving through the body, is partly a result of these infrasound vibrations. The emotional impact of the performance is partly a result of the emotional and psychological effects of infrasound on the nervous system and the brain. This raises interesting questions about the nature of musical experience. If infrasound contributes to the emotional power of live music, and if infrasound can trigger emotional responses independent of the conscious perception of music, then the boundary between the musical and the physical, between the aesthetic and the physiological, becomes blurred. The emotional response to a musical performance is not solely a product of the conscious perception and appreciation of the music. It is also a product of the physical vibrations that the music generates and the way that these vibrations affect the listener's body and brain. The presence illusion. Why you feel watched in certain rooms. One of the most unsettling experiences a human being can have is the sensation of being watched when alone in a room. You are standing by yourself in a space where you know no one else is present, yet you feel the distinct impression that another being is observing you. Your skin prickles. The hair on the back of your neck stands on end. You feel an overwhelming urge to turn around, to look over your shoulder, to search for the source of this mysterious attention. Yet when you look, you find nothing. No one is there. Nothing has changed in your environment. Yet the sensation of presence persists, an uncanny, disturbing feeling that something or someone is with you in the room. This phenomenon, known as the feeling of presence, has been reported throughout human history and across all cultures. In folklore and mythology, it is often attributed to ghosts, spirits, or other supernatural beings. In modern times, it has been reported by individuals in infrasound-rich environments, by people with certain neurological conditions, and by individuals in sensory deprivation experiments. The feeling of presence is one of the most compelling pieces of evidence that people often attribute to supernatural phenomena, yet it may have a straightforward explanation rooted in neuroscience and the effects of infrasound on the brain. The sensation of being watched is intimately connected to your sense of self and your sense of personal space. You have an intuitive understanding of where your body ends and the external world begins. You know the boundaries of your own physical form. You understand the space immediately surrounding your body as your personal space, the area in which you feel comfortable and in control. When another person enters your personal space, you are aware of their presence. You can sense their proximity, even if you are not looking directly at them. This sense of another person's presence is based partly on conscious perception. You can see or hear them, but it is also based on unconscious processing of subtle cues. Your brain is constantly monitoring your surroundings for the presence of other people. This monitoring is partly conscious. You actively look for other people and attend to their presence, but it is also partly unconscious. Your brain processes information about subtle movements, sounds, and other cues that might indicate the presence of another person, and it alerts your conscious mind if it detects signs of another being. This vigilance for the presence of other people is an evolutionary adaptation. Throughout human history, the presence of other people could mean the difference between safety and danger, between cooperation and conflict. Your brain evolved to be highly sensitive to signs of another person's presence. When you are in a space saturated with infrasound, the normal processing of information about other people's presence can become disrupted. The infrasound vibrations travel through your body, affecting the functioning of your brain, particularly the brain regions involved in sensing your body's location in space and detecting the presence of other beings. Your insula, which processes information about your body's internal state, receives unusual signals from the vibrations caused by infrasound. Your temporoparietal junction, which is involved in integrating information about your body's location and the boundaries between self and other, receives disrupted signals. The result is a blurred sense of the boundaries between your own body and the external world. This blurring of boundaries can generate the sensation of presence. If your brain cannot clearly determine where your body ends and the external world begins, it may interpret the unusual sensations it is receiving as coming from another being. Your brain, searching for an explanation for the unusual sensations and the disrupted sense of self, generates the perception of another being's presence in the room. This is not a hallucination in the traditional sense. You are not seeing or hearing another person. Rather, it is a distortion of the normal processes by which your brain detects and interprets the presence of other beings. The role of expectation and belief. The sensation of presence is not purely a result of infrasound's physical effects on the brain. Expectation and belief also play significant roles. If you enter a room that you believe to be haunted, your brain is primed to detect signs of a supernatural presence. Your attention is heightened, your threat detection systems are activated. You are actively searching for evidence of a ghost or spirit. If you then experience the sensation of presence, triggered by infrasound, you are likely to interpret this sensation as confirmation of the haunted nature of the room. Your belief that the room is haunted reinforces your interpretation of the sensation as a ghostly presence. This interaction between physical sensation and psychological expectation creates a powerful feedback loop. The infrasound triggers unusual sensations and a sense of presence. Your expectation that the room is haunted leads you to interpret these sensations as evidence of a supernatural being. This interpretation reinforces your belief that the room is haunted, which further primes your brain to detect signs of supernatural presence. The combination of physical sensation and psychological expectation creates a compelling, seemingly undeniable experience of a ghostly presence. Different people respond differently to the same infrasound exposure. Some people are highly sensitive to infrasound and experience strong sensations of presence and unease. Others are less sensitive and may not notice any unusual effects. This variation in sensitivity is partly due to differences in individual physiology. Different people have different resonant frequencies and different sensitivities to vibration. It is also partly due to differences in psychological factors such as expectation, belief, and individual differences in threat sensitivity. The phenomenon of the presence illusion reveals something profound about the nature of human perception and consciousness. We tend to think of perception as a straightforward process. We perceive objects and beings in our environment, and our brain creates a representation of this external reality. But perception is far more complex and constructive than this simple model suggests. Your brain is not a passive receiver of information about the external world. Rather, it is an active constructor of experience, creating a representation of reality based on incoming sensory information, past experience, expectation, and belief. The feeling of presence in an infrasound-rich environment is a dramatic illustration of how the brain constructs experience. The infrasound provides unusual sensory input. Your brain, receiving this unusual input and unable to identify a clear source for it, constructs an explanation, the presence of another being. This construction feels absolutely real. The sensation of presence is not something you are imagining or inventing consciously. It is a genuine experience, generated by your brain's attempt to make sense of unusual sensory input. Yet the experience does not correspond to an actual being present in the room. The presence that you sense is an illusion, a construction of your brain in response to infrasound. Resonance and the human frame. How your body becomes an instrument. Your body is not a rigid, unchanging structure. It is a dynamic, fluid system constantly in motion, constantly vibrating at multiple frequencies simultaneously. Even when you are standing perfectly still, your body is vibrating. Your heart beats, pumping blood through your arteries and veins. Your lungs expand and contract with each breath. Your muscles constantly make tiny adjustments to maintain your balance and posture. Your nervous system fires electrical signals continuously. At every moment, your body is in motion, and motion is vibration. The human body has natural resonant frequencies, frequencies at which different parts of your body prefer to vibrate. Your chest cavity, the large hollow space in your torso containing your heart and lungs, has a resonant frequency somewhere in the range of 5 to 7 Hz. This means that if you expose your chest cavity to vibrations at these frequencies, the cavity will vibrate with greater amplitude than if you expose it to vibrations at other frequencies. The soft tissues of your abdomen have resonant frequencies in a different range. Your head and brain have their own resonant frequencies. Your entire body is a complex system of interconnected resonators, each with its own preferred frequencies of vibration. When infrasound passes through your environment, it does not simply pass through your body unchanged. Rather, your body responds to the infrasound, vibrating in resonance with the low-frequency vibrations. If the infrasound contains frequencies that match the resonant frequencies of your body, the resonance will be particularly strong. Your chest cavity will vibrate with greater amplitude. Your organs will oscillate more vigorously. Your entire body will become an instrument, vibrating in sympathy with the infrasound in your environment. This resonance has profound implications for how infrasound affects you. The amplitude of vibration in your body depends partly on the intensity of the infrasound in your environment, but it also depends on how well the frequencies of the infrasound match the resonant frequencies of your body. A relatively weak infrasound signal, at a frequency that matches your body's resonant frequency, can cause stronger vibrations in your body than a more intense infrasound signal at a frequency that does not match your body's resonant frequency. The resonance of the chest cavity. Your chest cavity is a particularly important resonator for infrasound. This large, hollow space in your torso, bounded by your ribs, your spine, and your diaphragm, contains your heart and lungs. The walls of this cavity are made of bone and muscle, materials that conduct vibration efficiently. When infrasound at the resonant frequency of your chest cavity passes through your body, your entire chest cavity begins to vibrate in resonance. This is not a subtle, barely perceptible vibration. It is a significant, noticeable oscillation of the entire chest area. When your chest cavity vibrates, everything inside it vibrates as well. Your heart vibrates. Your lungs vibrate. Your diaphragm vibrates. The blood in your arteries and veins vibrates. The air in your lungs vibrates. Your vagus nerve, which runs through your chest and extends from your brain to your abdominal organs, vibrates along with the rest of your chest cavity. All of these vibrations are detected by sensory receptors throughout your chest, and signals about these vibrations are sent to your brain. The sensation of your chest cavity vibrating is profoundly unsettling. You may feel a pressure in your chest, a tightness, a sense of something moving inside you. You may feel your heart racing or beating irregularly, even though the vibration of your chest cavity is not actually causing your heart to beat faster or irregularly. It is simply causing you to be more aware of your heartbeat. You may feel difficulty breathing, a sense that your breath is being restricted even though your lungs are functioning normally. These sensations can be extremely disturbing, particularly if you do not understand their source. You may interpret them as signs of a heart condition, a respiratory illness, or some other medical emergency, but they are often simply the result of your body resonating with infrasound. The phenomenon of resonance explains why infrasound at specific frequencies can have particularly strong effects on people. If the infrasound matches the resonant frequency of your chest cavity, the effect will be strong. If the infrasound is at a frequency that does not match your body's resonant frequencies, the effect will be weaker. This is why different people may respond differently to the same infrasound exposure. Different people have slightly different resonant frequencies, depending on their body size, composition, and other physical characteristics. Infrasound that resonates strongly with one person's body may not resonate as strongly with another person's body. Whole body resonance patterns. While your chest cavity is perhaps the most prominent resonator in your body, it is not the only one. Your head, your abdomen, your limbs, all of these have their own resonant frequencies. When infrasound passes through your body, multiple resonances may be excited simultaneously. Your chest cavity vibrates at one frequency. Your head vibrates at another. Your abdomen vibrates at yet another. The result is a complex pattern of vibrations throughout your body, a symphony of resonances that creates a unique pattern of sensation and disturbance. The interaction between these multiple resonances creates complex patterns of vibration within your body. Regions of your body where multiple resonances align, where vibrations from different resonators reinforce each other, experience stronger vibrations. Regions where resonances are out of phase, where vibrations from different resonators cancel each other out, experience weaker vibrations. The overall pattern of vibration in your body is thus far more complex than a simple uniform oscillation. This complexity of whole body resonance patterns means that infrasound affects different people differently and affects different parts of the same person's body differently. What matters is not just the frequency and intensity of the infrasound, but also how that infrasound interacts with the unique resonant properties of each individual's body. A frequency that causes strong resonance in one person's chest cavity might cause minimal resonance in another person's chest cavity. A frequency that creates a particularly disturbing sensation in one person's head might have little effect on another person's head. The neural consequences of bodily resonance. When your body resonates with infrasound, the vibrations in your body are detected by sensory receptors throughout your body. These receptors send signals to your brain about the vibrations they are detecting. Your brain receives a constant stream of information about the vibrations occurring in your body. This information is processed by your insula and other brain regions that monitor your body's internal state. Your brain generates a sense of what is happening in your body based on this sensory information. When your body is resonating with infrasound, the sensory information reaching your brain is unusual. Your brain is receiving signals about vibrations and movements in your body that are not the result of voluntary muscle contractions, not the result of external forces like gravity or touch, but rather the result of your body vibrating in resonance with environmental infrasound. Your brain must make sense of these unusual signals. It must generate an explanation for why your body is vibrating in this unusual way. The explanations that your brain generates depend on context and expectation. If you are in a situation where you expect to experience something unusual, for example, if you are in a supposedly haunted location, or if you are aware that you are being exposed to infrasound for experimental purposes, your brain may interpret the unusual bodily sensations as evidence of this expected phenomenon. If you are in a situation where you do not expect anything unusual to happen, your brain may interpret the unusual sensations as signs of a medical problem or a threat to your health. The fact that your body becomes a resonating instrument for infrasound means that infrasound affects you in ways that are both physical and psychological. The physical vibrations of your body trigger psychological responses. The unusual sensations generated by these vibrations affect your emotional state, your perception, and your interpretation of your environment. The boundary between the physical and the psychological becomes blurred. The infrasound, working through the resonance of your body, shapes your inner experience in profound and often mysterious ways. Fear without reason, the psychological bridge between physics and emotion. Fear is one of the most powerful emotions human beings experience. When you are afraid, your entire being is mobilized for action. Your heart races, your breathing becomes rapid and shallow, your muscles tense, your mind narrows its focus to the perceived threat. Your body is flooded with stress hormones. Every system in your body is oriented toward responding to danger. Fear is not merely a psychological state, it is a whole body experience that involves profound changes in physiology and brain function. Yet fear can arise without any rational cause. You can find yourself afraid in a situation where there is no objective danger, where nothing in your environment poses a threat to your safety. You can be afraid of something you cannot identify, afraid of nothing in particular, afraid simply because you feel afraid. This seemingly irrational fear is one of the most puzzling aspects of human emotion. Why would your body mobilize for action in response to a threat that does not exist? Why would your emotions respond to something that your conscious mind recognizes as harmless? Infrasound provides a powerful explanation for fear without rational cause. When infrasound passes through your body, it triggers fear responses in your nervous system and your brain. Your amygdala, the brain region responsible for threat detection and fear response, becomes activated. Your nervous system shifts into a state of high alert. You experience fear, yet when you search your environment for the source of this fear, you find nothing. There is no predator. There is no visible danger. There is no logical reason to be afraid, yet you are afraid nonetheless. The fear triggered by infrasound is not a false or artificial emotion. It is a genuine fear response, generated by your nervous system in response to sensory input. The fact that this sensory input comes from infrasound rather than from a visible threat does not make the fear less real or less powerful. Your body does not know the difference. Your amygdala does not reason, "This is just infrasound, therefore I should not be afraid." Rather, it responds to the pattern of sensory input, recognizing it as similar to patterns that have historically been associated with threat and triggering a fear response. The evolutionary logic of infrasound-induced fear. From an evolutionary perspective, the fear response triggered by infrasound makes sense. Throughout human history, infrasound has been associated with large-scale environmental events and the presence of large animals. The low-frequency vibrations generated by a distant earthquake, by severe weather, by a large predator moving through the landscape, these would have been genuine threats to human survival. A human ancestor who could sense infrasound and respond with fear and caution would be more likely to survive than an ancestor who ignored infrasound. The ancestral humans who were sensitive to infrasound, who responded to it with fear and vigilance, were more likely to survive and pass on their genes. Your brain's sensitivity to infrasound and the fear response it triggers are thus not malfunctions or errors. They are features of a sophisticated threat detection system that evolved over millions of years to help your ancestors survive in a dangerous world. In the modern world, where infrasound in enclosed spaces is not associated with genuine threats, this evolutionary adaptation can lead to false alarms, but the system itself is working as it was designed to work. It is detecting a signal that historically has been associated with threat, and it is triggering an appropriate defensive response. The cognitive interpretation of infrasound-induced fear. Once fear has been triggered by infrasound, your conscious mind becomes involved in interpreting this fear and searching for its cause. Your conscious mind is aware that you are afraid, but it does not have access to the information that triggered the fear. You do not consciously perceive the infrasound. You do not consciously understand that low-frequency vibrations are affecting your body and brain. All you know is that you feel afraid and you do not know why. Your conscious mind then engages in a process of inference, searching for an explanation for the fear you are experiencing. This process is often called appraisal or cognitive interpretation. You look around your environment searching for possible threats. You notice shadows, unusual shapes, sounds that might be explained as footsteps or voices. You remember stories about the location you are in, tales of hauntings or supernatural events. Your mind, searching for an explanation for the fear you feel, begins to construct a narrative that explains this fear. If you are in a location that you believe to be haunted, your mind may interpret the fear as evidence of a ghostly presence. If you are in a location associated with a tragic death or a dark historical event, your mind may interpret the fear as a response to the psychic imprint of this event. If you are in a location with no particular associations, your mind may still construct an explanation, perhaps imagining a burglar or an intruder, or perhaps attributing the fear to your own anxiety or nervousness. The remarkable thing about this process is how compelling the resulting narrative can be. Once your mind has constructed an explanation for the fear you are experiencing, This explanation seems to account for all of your experiences. The fear seems to confirm the reality of the threat you have imagined. The unusual sensations in your body seem to be evidence of a supernatural presence. The strange sounds you hear seem to be confirmation that something is occurring in the environment. Your conscious mind becomes convinced of the truth of the narrative it has constructed. The role of attention and perception. When you are afraid, your attention narrows. You become hypervigilant, searching for signs of threat. Your perception becomes biased toward detecting threat-relevant information. You notice things you would normally overlook: a creak in the floorboards, a slight movement of a curtain, a shadow in the corner of the room. All of these become candidates for explanation as evidence of a threat. Your brain, primed by fear to detect threat, becomes increasingly likely to interpret ambiguous sensory information as confirming the presence of a threat. This biasing of attention and perception is an adaptive response in a genuine threatening situation. If you are facing a real predator or a real danger, it is important that you notice all possible signs of threat. You want your attention focused on potential danger. You want your perception biased toward detecting threat-relevant information. But when the fear has been triggered by infrasound rather than by a genuine threat, this biasing of attention and perception becomes problematic. It leads you to notice and interpret evidence as confirming a threat that does not actually exist. The phenomenon of fear without reason, triggered by infrasound, reveals something profound about the relationship between our physical bodies, our brains, and our conscious experience. We tend to think of our emotions as arising from our thoughts, as being generated by our conscious interpretation of situations. But emotions are also generated by our bodies, by physical processes that occur below the threshold of conscious awareness. Infrasound, working through the resonance of your body and the functioning of your nervous system, generates emotional responses that feel absolutely real, yet are not triggered by any conscious perception of a threat. Euphoria from the depths. The opposite side of infrasonic experience. While much of the discussion of infrasound focuses on the fear and unease it can generate, infrasound can also trigger profoundly positive emotional states. Euphoria, awe, transcendence, peace, and spiritual awakening are all emotional states that have been reported by people exposed to infrasound, particularly in contexts where they are predisposed to interpret these experiences in positive terms. The same physical vibrations that in one context trigger fear and dread can, in another context, trigger joy and transcendence. The difference between fear-inducing infrasound experiences and euphoric infrasound experiences often comes down to context and expectation. If you enter a space believing it to be haunted, and you experience unusual sensations and emotional responses, you are likely to interpret these experiences as frightening or disturbing. If you enter the same space believing it to be sacred or spiritually significant, you are likely to interpret the same physical sensations as spiritual or transcendent experiences. This is not to say that infrasound-induced euphoria is merely a product of expectation or belief. The physical effects of infrasound on your body and brain are real, regardless of how you interpret them. When infrasound resonates with your body, your organs vibrate, your nervous system receives unusual sensory input, and your brain's emotional centers become activated. These physical processes are the same, whether the resulting emotional state is fear or euphoria. What differs is the interpretation and the emotional coloring given to these physical experiences. The neuroscience of infrasound-induced bliss. Certain frequencies of infrasound may have particular capacity to trigger positive emotional states. Research has suggested that infrasound in the frequency range of 7 Hz, which corresponds to the resonant frequency of the human chest cavity, may have particularly strong effects on human emotion and perception. Interestingly, 7 Hz is also close to the frequency of theta waves in the brain oscillations that are associated with meditation, relaxation, and states of flow. Some researchers have speculated that infrasound at 7 Hz might enhance theta wave activity in the brain, promoting relaxation and positive emotional states. When your brain is in a theta state, you're in a state of deep relaxation, often accompanied by a sense of peace, clarity, and connection. Theta states are associated with meditation, creative insight, and spiritual experience. If infrasound at 7 Hz enhances theta wave activity in your brain, it would explain why people exposed to such infrasound often report feeling relaxed, peaceful, and spiritually connected. Additionally, infrasound can trigger the release of endorphins, the brain's natural opioid chemicals. Endorphins are associated with pleasure, pain relief, and a sense of well-being. When your body experiences unusual vibrations from infrasound, your brain may interpret this as a form of physical stress or exertion and respond by releasing endorphins. These endorphins can create a sense of pleasure and euphoria, a natural high that can be quite compelling. Infrasound in sacred and spiritual contexts. Many of the world's great sacred spaces, temples, cathedrals, mosques, and other places of worship, generate significant infrasound through their architecture and their location. The massive stone structures, the large interior volumes, the natural features of their locations, all of these contribute to the generation and amplification of infrasound. When people visit these sacred spaces, they are exposed to infrasound. The physical effects of this infrasound on their bodies and brains, the resonance of their organs, the activation of their emotional centers, the release of endorphins, contribute to the spiritual and transcendent experiences they report. The question arises whether the spiritual significance attributed to these spaces is a product of the infrasound they generate, or whether the infrasound is simply a physical manifestation of the spiritual energy that these spaces contain. This is ultimately a philosophical question that science cannot answer. But what we can say is that the infrasound contributes significantly to the emotional and psychological impact of these spaces. The profound sense of peace, awe, and spiritual connection that people experience in sacred spaces is not solely a product of their beliefs and expectations. It is also a product of the physical vibrations that their bodies are experiencing. The paradox of infrasound-induced emotion. The fact that the same infrasound can trigger either fear or euphoria, depending on context and expectation, reveals something profound about the nature of emotion. Emotion is not a simple, direct response to external events. Rather, it is a complex construction involving both physical processes in your body and brain and psychological processes of interpretation and meaning-making. The physical vibrations of infrasound provide the raw material for emotional experience, but the specific emotion that emerges, fear or joy, dread or awe, depends on how your conscious mind interprets these physical sensations. This does not mean that emotions triggered by infrasound are false or illusory. The euphoria experienced in a sacred space is as real and as valid as the fear experienced in a supposedly haunted location. Both are genuine emotional states generated by real physical processes in your body and brain. What differs is the interpretation and the meaning attributed to these emotional states. In one context, the unusual sensations are interpreted as evidence of a supernatural threat. In another context, the same sensations are interpreted as evidence of a spiritual presence or a transcendent experience. The phenomenon of infrasound-induced euphoria also reveals the remarkable plasticity of human emotion. Your emotional response to the same physical stimulus can vary dramatically depending on context and expectation. This suggests that emotion is not rigidly determined by your brain's wiring or by external events, but rather is something that you actively construct through the process of interpreting and making meaning of your experiences. This places significant responsibility on us as conscious beings. The emotional quality of our lives is not entirely determined by external circumstances. It is partly shaped by how we interpret and make meaning of our experiences. Spatial perception altered. How low frequencies reshape your sense of space. Your sense of where you are in space, your understanding of the distance and direction of objects around you, and your perception of the size and shape of the space you are in, all of these are constructed by your brain based on sensory information from multiple sources. Your eyes provide visual information about the location and distance of objects. Your ears provide auditory information that helps you localize sounds in space. Your vestibular system, located in your inner ear, detects your body's position and movement in space. Your proprioceptive system involving sensory receptors throughout your body, provides information about where your limbs are in space. All of this information is integrated by your brain to create a coherent sense of your location and orientation in space. Infrasound can disrupt this normal integration of spatial information. The vibrations caused by infrasound affect your vestibular system, sending signals to your brain about movement and changes in orientation. But these signals do not correspond to actual movement or changes in orientation. You are standing still, yet your brain is receiving signals indicating that you are moving or that your spatial orientation has changed. This mismatch between actual and perceived movement can create a profound sense of disorientation and spatial confusion. When your spatial perception is disrupted, your sense of the space around you changes. A room that you know to be a certain size may seem to expand or contract. The distance to a wall or object may seem greater or smaller than it actually is. The shape of the space may seem distorted or unstable. These distortions of spatial perception are not hallucinations. You are not seeing the space as being a different shape than it actually is. Rather, your sense of space, your intuitive understanding of the dimensions and geometry of the space, is being altered by the disrupted spatial signals reaching your brain. The vestibular system and spatial disorientation. Your vestibular system is located in your inner ear, just adjacent to the cochlea, the structure responsible for hearing. The vestibular system contains organs called the semicircular canals and the otolith organs. The semicircular canals detect rotation and angular acceleration, changes in the direction you are facing. The otolith organs detect linear acceleration and the direction of gravity. Together, these organs provide your brain with information about your body's position and movement in space. Infrasound can affect the vestibular system by causing vibrations in the fluid contained within the semicircular canals and the otolith organs. When this fluid vibrates, it stimulates the sensory hair cells in these organs, sending signals to your brain about movement and changes in orientation. If the infrasound vibrations are strong enough, or if they are at frequencies that particularly affect the vestibular system, the result can be significant vestibular stimulation. The signals sent by your vestibular system are processed by your brain in conjunction with signals from your other sensory systems. Your brain integrates this information to create a sense of your body's position and movement in space. When your vestibular system is being stimulated by infrasound, your brain receives signals about movement and changes in orientation that do not correspond to actual movement. Your brain attempts to make sense of these signals, often by assuming that you are moving or that your spatial orientation has changed, even though you are standing perfectly still. The result of this mismatch between the signals from your vestibular system and the actual state of your body can be profound disorientation and dizziness. You may feel as though the room is spinning, even though you can see with your eyes that the room is stationary. You may feel as though you are falling or floating, even though you are standing on solid ground. You may lose your sense of which way is up, even though gravity is still pulling you downward. These sensations are not produced by actual movement. They are produced by the mismatch between the signals reaching your brain from your vestibular system and the sensory information from your other senses. Distortions of size and distance perception. In addition to affecting your sense of movement and orientation, infrasound can also affect your perception of the size and distance of objects and spaces. Your brain estimates the distance to an object based on multiple cues: the size of the object's image on your retina, the amount of visual detail you can perceive, the parallax created by your two eyes, the time it takes sound to travel from the object to your ears, and other cues. When infrasound disrupts your sensory processing, it can affect how your brain interprets these distance cues. For example, infrasound might affect your perception of auditory distance cues. Normally, you estimate the distance to a sound source based on the time it takes the sound to reach both ears. The sound reaches the nearer ear slightly before it reaches the farther ear, and based on the loudness of the sound. If infrasound causes unusual vibrations in your ears or your vestibular system, it might create the impression that sounds are coming from different distances than they actually are. Additionally, Infrasound can affect your visual perception of distance and size. When your vestibular system is disrupted, your brain's processing of visual information can be affected. Your brain integrates vestibular information with visual information to estimate distances and perceive size. If the vestibular information is disrupted, your visual perception of distance and size can be distorted accordingly. A wall that is actually 5 meters away might seem to be 10 meters away or only 2 meters away. An object that is actually small might seem large, or vice versa. The sense of presence and spatial distortion. The distortion of spatial perception caused by infrasound can contribute to the sense of presence phenomenon. When your sense of space is disrupted, when the boundaries of the space around you seem unstable or distorted, your brain may interpret this as evidence that something unusual is present in the space. The distortion of spatial perception, combined with the disrupted sense of body boundaries and the feeling of unusual sensations in your body, can create a compelling impression that another being is present. This makes sense from a neurological perspective. Your brain uses spatial information to determine where other people are in relation to you. If your spatial perception is disrupted, if your sense of the boundaries between yourself and the space around you is blurred, your brain may generate the impression that another being is present in this disrupted space. The spatial distortion thus reinforces the sense of presence, making the impression of another being even more compelling. Ask the ghost in the machine. Infrasound and the neuroscience of apparition. Throughout history, people have reported seeing ghosts, visual apparitions of deceased individuals or other supernatural beings. These experiences are among the most compelling pieces of evidence that people cite when discussing the supernatural. If a person has seen a ghost with their own eyes, how can this not be evidence of something beyond the material world? Yet modern neuroscience is revealing that visual hallucinations and false perceptions can be generated by the brain through various physical mechanisms, including exposure to infrasound. The visual cortex, the region of your brain responsible for processing visual information, can generate visual perceptions in response to various stimuli, not just light entering your eyes. When you dream, your visual cortex generates vivid visual experiences without any light entering your eyes. When you have hallucinations, your visual cortex generates visual perceptions that do not correspond to anything in your external environment. These hallucinations can be indistinguishable from genuine visual perceptions. You see something with apparent clarity and detail, yet nothing corresponding to what you see is actually present in your environment. Infrasound can contribute to the generation of visual hallucinations and false perceptions through several mechanisms. First, infrasound can affect the functioning of your visual cortex directly. The vibrations caused by infrasound travel through your body and your brain, affecting neural activity in various brain regions, including the visual cortex. If these vibrations affect the visual cortex in the right way, they can trigger visual activity that generates visual perceptions. Second, infrasound can affect the functioning of your eyes and the visual system. The vibrations caused by infrasound can affect the fluid in your eyes, causing disturbances in the image that reaches your retina. These disturbances can be interpreted by your brain as visual information about the environment, leading to false perceptions. Additionally, infrasound can cause your eyes to vibrate, affecting the stability of the image on your retina. This instability can trigger various visual phenomena, such as apparent motion of stationary objects or the appearance of shapes or shadows. Third, infrasound can affect the functioning of your vestibular system, which in turn affects your visual perception. Your vestibular system and your visual system work together to stabilize your visual perception as your head moves. When your vestibular system is disrupted by infrasound, your visual system can malfunction, generating false visual perceptions. Additionally, when your vestibular system is disrupted, your brain may generate visual hallucinations as it attempts to make sense of the conflicting signals from your visual and vestibular systems. The phenomenon of shadow figures. One of the most commonly reported types of apparition is the shadow figure, a dark humanoid shape perceived in peripheral vision, often described as moving quickly or disappearing when looked at directly. The phenomenon of shadow figures is particularly interesting because it suggests that infrasound and other environmental factors may play a role in generating these visual experiences. Shadow figures are typically perceived in peripheral vision, in the areas at the edges of your visual field, where your vision is less detailed and more motion sensitive. Your peripheral vision is particularly sensitive to movement, but provides less detailed information about what is moving. Your brain interprets movement in peripheral vision as potentially significant. Movement in your peripheral vision might indicate a threat or an important event and directs your attention toward it. But the peripheral visual system is also prone to errors and false perceptions. When infrasound causes vibrations in your body, including your head and eyes, these vibrations can create apparent motion in your peripheral visual field. Your brain, detecting this apparent motion, interprets it as a moving object and generates the perception of a shadow figure. Because the perception arises from the motion-sensitive but detail-poor peripheral visual system, the perceived figure has little detail. It appears as a dark shape or shadow. When you turn your head to look directly at the figure, the image is no longer in peripheral vision. Your central, detail-oriented visual system takes over, and there is nothing to see. The figure disappears not because it was never there, but because the conditions that generated the perception of the figure in peripheral vision no longer apply. The influence of expectation on visual perception. Visual perception is not a passive process of receiving an image from the world and transmitting it to the brain. Rather, it is an active, constructive process in which your brain generates a perception based on the sensory input it receives and on your expectations about what you are likely to perceive. Your brain uses past experience and expectation to interpret sensory information. When the sensory input is ambiguous or unusual, your expectations play a larger role in determining what you perceive. In locations where people expect to see ghosts, supposedly haunted castles, burial grounds, locations associated with tragic deaths, visitors' expectations are primed by these associations. When they then experience unusual visual phenomena, apparent motion in peripheral vision, distortions of visual perception caused by vestibular disruption, visual artifacts caused by eye vibration, their brains interpret these phenomena in light of their expectations. They perceive a ghost because they expect to see a ghost, and the unusual visual phenomena provide material that their brains can shape into an apparent ghostly apparition. This does not mean that the visual perception is a conscious fabrication or a deliberate hallucination. The person is not consciously imagining or inventing the ghost. Rather, their brain is constructing a visual perception based on unusual sensory input and on expectations about what they are likely to perceive. The resulting perception feels absolutely real, indistinguishable from a genuine visual perception of an actual object. Yet it is a construction of the brain, generated in response to infrasound and other environmental factors, not a perception of an actual supernatural being. Environmental design and invisible influence. Buildings that shape your mood. The spaces we inhabit shape our moods, our emotions, and our psychological states in ways that we are often not consciously aware of. A room with high ceilings feels more open and expansive than a room with low ceilings. A room flooded with natural light feels more uplifting than a room that is dim or artificially lit. A room decorated in warm colors feels more comfortable than a room decorated in cool colors. These effects on mood and emotion are partly explained by the conscious perception of these environmental features. We consciously see the high ceilings, the natural light, the colors, and we respond emotionally to what we perceive. But environmental design also affects our mood and emotion through mechanisms that operate below the level of conscious awareness. The infrasound generated by a building's architecture and location, the subtle vibrations that pass through our bodies as we move through spaces, the acoustic properties of rooms that affect how sounds are transmitted, all of these environmental factors influence our emotional and psychological states without our conscious awareness. Architects and designers have long understood at an intuitive level that certain spaces feel different from others, that certain architectural features create particular emotional atmospheres. A cathedral feels different from a warehouse, not just because of the conscious perception of the architecture, but also because of the different infrasound environments created by the two structures. A modern office building with open floor plans and large window areas feels different from a medieval fortress with narrow corridors and small windows, not just because of the visual differences, but also because of the different vibrations that permeate the two spaces. The design of spaces for emotional impact. Some architects and designers deliberately design spaces to create particular emotional effects. Concert halls are designed not just to optimize the audible sound quality, but also to create emotional impact through the generation of infrasound. The size and shape of the hall, the materials used in its construction, the acoustic design, all of these factors are carefully chosen to create a particular emotional atmosphere and to amplify the emotional impact of the music being performed. Similarly, sacred spaces are often designed to create emotional and spiritual impact. The soaring vaulted ceilings of cathedrals are designed to inspire awe and a sense of transcendence. The massive stone walls create a sense of permanence and stability. The acoustic properties of these spaces are designed to make music and chanting sound particularly moving and powerful. All of these design choices contribute to the emotional impact of the space, and many of them have the effect of generating significant infrasound. The phenomenon of environmental design, creating emotional impact through infrasound, is not limited to grand public spaces. Even residential spaces are affected by infrasound. A room with a vaulted ceiling generates different infrasound patterns than a room with a flat ceiling. A room with hard, reflective surfaces generates more infrasound than a room with soft, absorbent surfaces. A room located near a highway or railway generates infrasound from traffic, while a room located in a quiet rural area generates less infrasound. All of these factors affect the emotional atmosphere of the room, influencing how people feel when they spend time in the space. The modern environment and infrasound. Modern buildings designed with efficiency and economy in mind often have quite different infrasound characteristics than older buildings. Modern office buildings typically have open floor plans, with large open spaces divided by movable partitions rather than solid walls. These spaces tend to generate less infrasound than traditional enclosed rooms, because the large volume and open design prevent infrasound from building up. Additionally, modern buildings often use sound-absorbing materials in their construction, which absorb infrasound as well as audible sound. The result is that modern buildings often feel different emotionally from older buildings, partly because of the different infrasound environments they create. People working in modern office buildings may experience less of the infrasound-related emotional effects that people in older buildings experience. This could have both positive and negative consequences. On one hand, it might reduce anxiety and unease that infrasound can trigger. On the other hand, it might also reduce the sense of awe and transcendence that infrasound can trigger. Some researchers have speculated that the modern built environment, with its reduced infrasound levels, may contribute to the epidemic of anxiety and depression in modern societies. The hypothesis is that human beings have evolved in environments saturated with infrasound from natural sources, wind, water, geological activity, and that our brains and bodies have become accustomed to the effects of infrasound. In the modern built environment, with its reduced infrasound, we are deprived of these environmental cues that our brains have evolved to expect. This deprivation might contribute to psychological disturbance. However, this hypothesis remains speculative. What we can say with confidence is that the infrasound characteristics of buildings affect the emotional and psychological states of people within them, and that deliberate design choices about the infrasound properties of spaces can be used to create particular emotional atmospheres. As we become more aware of the role that infrasound plays in shaping human experience, architects and designers may begin to consciously consider infrasound in their design choices, creating spaces that deliberately generate or suppress infrasound, depending on the emotional effects desired. The frequency of consciousness. How vibrations connect to brain states. Your brain is not a static structure but a dynamic system in constant motion, characterized by patterns of electrical activity that change moment to moment. When you are awake and alert, Your brain exhibits certain patterns of electrical activity. When you are relaxed, your brain exhibits different patterns. When you are asleep, the patterns change again. When you are in a state of deep meditation or spiritual experience, the patterns are different still. These different patterns of brain activity are associated with different states of consciousness, different ways of perceiving and experiencing the world. Brain waves are classified by their frequency, measured in hertz. Delta waves, at frequencies below 4 hertz, are associated with deep sleep and unconsciousness. Theta waves, at frequencies between 4 and 8 hertz, are associated with relaxation, meditation, and creative insight. Alpha waves, at frequencies between 8 and 12 hertz, are associated with relaxed wakefulness and light meditation. Beta waves, at frequencies above 12 hertz, are associated with active thinking, problem-solving, and alert wakefulness. Gamma waves, at frequencies above 30 hertz, are associated with peak mental performance and heightened perception. The fact that infrasound frequencies, which range below 20 hertz, overlap with the frequency ranges of delta, theta, and alpha brainwaves is significant. Some researchers have speculated that infrasound might affect brainwave activity, promoting particular brainwave patterns and the states of consciousness associated with them. If infrasound at 7 hertz, for example, enhances theta wave activity in the brain, it could promote relaxation, meditation, and creative insight. The entrainment of brainwaves. The phenomenon of brainwave entrainment refers to the tendency of the brain to synchronize its electrical activity with external rhythmic stimuli. If you are exposed to a rhythmic stimulus at a particular frequency, your brain waves may begin to oscillate at that same frequency. This phenomenon has been demonstrated with audible sound frequencies. Exposing people to rhythmic sounds at particular frequencies can cause their brain waves to synchronize with those frequencies. Some researchers believe that infrasound might have similar effects on brain waves, causing the brain to synchronize with infrasound frequencies. If this is true, then exposure to infrasound at particular frequencies could promote particular brainwave patterns and the states of consciousness associated with them. Infrasound at 7 hertz, which corresponds to theta waves, might promote relaxation and meditation. Infrasound at 10 hertz, which corresponds to alpha waves, might promote relaxed wakefulness and light meditation. The implications of this are profound. It suggests that the infrasound environment we are exposed to could influence our state of consciousness, affecting how we think, feel, and perceive the world. The synchronization of body and brain. Beyond the entrainment of brain waves, infrasound might affect consciousness through the synchronization of bodily vibrations with brain activity. Your body and brain are intimately connected. The state of your body affects the state of your brain, and the state of your brain affects the state of your body. When infrasound causes your body to vibrate at particular frequencies, these vibrations might synchronize with brain activity occurring at similar frequencies. The result could be a state of profound coherence between body and brain, a unified state of oscillation that creates a particular quality of consciousness. Some contemplative traditions describe experiences of profound unity and synchronization between body and mind as the goal of meditation or spiritual practice. Practitioners describe a state in which the usual sense of separation between mind and body dissolves, and they experience a unified consciousness in which body and mind are one. If infrasound can promote such synchronization between body and brain, it might explain why people in infrasound-rich environments sometimes report experiences of profound unity and transcendence. The relationship between frequency and experience. Different frequencies of vibration seem to be associated with different qualities of experience. Low frequencies, below 20 Hz, seem to be associated with feelings of awe, transcendence, and connection to something larger than oneself. Slightly higher frequencies, in the range of 20 to 100 Hz, seem to be associated with feelings of movement and energy. Even higher frequencies, in the range of hundreds or thousands of Hertz, seem to be associated with feelings of clarity and alertness. These associations are not absolute or universal, but they seem to hold across many different people and contexts. This suggests that consciousness itself might be fundamentally related to frequency, to vibration. The particular frequency at which your brain and body are oscillating might determine the quality of your conscious experience. By manipulating the frequencies to which you are exposed, you might be able to influence the quality of your consciousness. This is a profound implication of the connection between infrasound and consciousness, suggesting that the material world of vibration and frequency is intimately connected to the subjective world of consciousness and experience. Living with the invisible, practical understanding of infrasound in daily life. Now that we have explored the science and the mystery of infrasound, the question arises, how does this knowledge apply to everyday life? How can we live more consciously and more wisely in a world filled with invisible vibrations that shape our emotional and psychological states? Understanding. Infrasound is not merely an intellectual exercise. It has practical implications for how we design our environments, how we interpret our experiences, and how we navigate the emotional and psychological landscapes of our lives. First, understanding infrasound can help us interpret our experiences more accurately. When you find yourself experiencing fear or unease in a particular location, you can now consider the possibility that infrasound might be playing a role. Instead of attributing your fear to a supernatural presence or to your own neurosis, you can recognize that low-frequency vibrations in your environment might be affecting your nervous system and your brain. This understanding does not necessarily eliminate the fear. The physical effects of infrasound are real, regardless of how you interpret them. But it can provide a framework for understanding your experience that is based on science rather than on supernatural belief. Similarly, when you experience profound peace or transcendence in a particular location, in a cathedral, in a concert hall, in nature, you can recognize that infrasound might be contributing to this experience. This does not diminish the validity or the meaningfulness of the experience. Rather, it deepens your understanding of how the material world and the spiritual or emotional aspects of experience are intertwined. The infrasound is not the source of the spiritual meaning. Rather, it is a physical medium through which spiritual experience is mediated. Designing your environment. Understanding infrasound can also inform how we design and modify our environments. If you find that a particular room in your home makes you feel anxious or uneasy, you might consider whether infrasound could be playing a role. If the room has hard, reflective surfaces and a resonant shape, it might be generating significant infrasound. You could reduce the infrasound in the room by adding soft, absorbent materials, curtains, rugs, soft furniture, that absorb low-frequency vibrations. You could also rearrange the room to change its resonant properties, breaking up the geometric patterns that might be amplifying infrasound. Conversely, if you have a room in which you want to promote relaxation and peace, you might consider designing it to generate or maintain certain frequencies of infrasound. A room designed to generate infrasound at 7 Hz, which corresponds to theta brainwaves, might promote relaxation and meditation. This could be achieved through careful attention to the room's dimensions, materials, and acoustic properties. In public spaces, offices, schools, hospitals, shopping centers, the management of infrasound could be considered as part of environmental design. Different spaces have different purposes and therefore different desired emotional atmospheres. A hospital room designed to promote healing and comfort might benefit from infrasound characteristics that promote relaxation and peace. A classroom designed to promote learning and alertness might benefit from different infrasound characteristics. As we become more aware of the role that infrasound plays in shaping human experience, we may begin to design public spaces with infrasound in mind. Interpreting supernatural experiences. For those who believe in the supernatural, understanding infrasound does not necessarily negate their beliefs. Rather, it provides a framework for understanding how the material world and the spiritual world might interact. If ghosts or spirits are real, perhaps they communicate through infrasound. Perhaps the vibrations that we detect through our bodies are the manifestation of spiritual presences in the material world. This is a speculative idea, but it is not contradicted by science. It is simply a way of interpreting the physical effects of infrasound within a spiritual or supernatural framework. For those who are skeptical of the supernatural, understanding infrasound provides a scientific explanation for many phenomena that have traditionally been attributed to ghosts or spirits. the fear experienced in supposedly haunted locations, the sense of presence, the visual phenomena, all of these can be explained through the effects of infrasound on the nervous system and the brain. This does not prove that ghosts do not exist. It simply provides an alternative explanation for the experiences that people have in infrasound-rich environments. Practical applications for health and well-being. Understanding infrasound also has practical applications for health and well-being. If you are prone to anxiety, you might try to minimize your exposure to infrasound that triggers fear responses. This could mean avoiding locations known to generate significant infrasound or modifying your environment to reduce infrasound levels. Conversely, if you are interested in meditation, relaxation, or spiritual experience, you might seek out environments that generate infrasound at frequencies that promote these states. Some researchers have investigated the use of infrasound therapeutically, exposing people to carefully controlled infrasound frequencies to promote relaxation, healing, or spiritual experience. While this research is still in its early stages, the results suggest that infrasound might have therapeutic potential. The key is understanding which frequencies promote which effects, and using this knowledge to design therapeutic interventions. The poetry of physics, finding peace in the frequencies that move us. We have journeyed together through the invisible world of infrasound, exploring the science of how your body detects vibrations below the threshold of hearing, how these vibrations affect your nervous system and your brain, and how they shape your emotional and psychological experience. We have visited ancient castles and concert halls, explored the neuroscience of fear and transcendence, and considered the philosophical implications of a world filled with vibrations that we feel but do not hear. Now, as we come to the end of this exploration, it is time to reflect on what this knowledge means for us as conscious beings navigating the world. The remarkable thing about infrasound is that it reveals the intimate connection between the material and the experiential, between physics and consciousness. We live in a world of vibrations, a universe fundamentally characterized by oscillation and frequency. The atoms that make up our bodies vibrate, the earth beneath our feet vibrates, the stars in the distant sky vibrate, and we, as conscious beings, are sensitive to these vibrations in ways that we have only recently begun to understand. The vibrations that we feel but do not hear shape our emotions, affect our thoughts, and influence our perception of reality. This realization is both humbling and empowering. It is humbling because it suggests that our conscious minds are not the sole determinants of our experience. Our emotions and perceptions are influenced by forces, infrasound vibrations, that operate beyond our conscious awareness. We are not entirely in control of our own experience. The material world presses in on us, shaping our inner life in ways that we cannot fully perceive or control. Yet this realization is also empowering. If we understand how infrasound affects us, we can take steps to shape our environment and our exposure to infrasound in ways that support our well-being and our goals. We can design spaces that promote relaxation or alertness, depending on what we need. We can interpret our experiences more accurately, understanding when our emotions are responses to genuine threats and when they are responses to infrasound. We can seek out environments that promote the emotional and spiritual states that we desire, and avoid environments that trigger unwanted emotional responses. The poetry of vibration. Throughout human history, poets and artists have been attuned to the vibrations that permeate the world, even before science could explain them. Poets speak of being moved by music, of feeling the vibrations of emotion, of being touched by the invisible forces that flow through the world. Artists create work that resonates with viewers, that vibrates at frequencies that seem to touch something deep within the human soul. These artists and poets were responding to the real physical vibrations that surround us, even if they did not have the scientific vocabulary to describe them. In a sense, science is simply catching up to what artists have always known, that the world is filled with vibrations, that these vibrations affect us profoundly, and that our experience of the world is shaped by the frequencies that move through us. The poetry of physics is the recognition that the material world of vibration and frequency is not separate from the world of consciousness and emotion. Rather, they are intimately intertwined. The vibrations that move through our bodies and our brains are the physical manifestation of the forces that move our hearts and our minds. Finding peace in vibration. As we live in a world saturated with infrasound, we are constantly being moved by vibrations that we do not consciously perceive. Rather than resisting this reality or denying it, we can find peace in accepting it. The vibrations that move through us are not enemies or threats. They are simply part of the fabric of the physical world in which we exist. By becoming more aware of these vibrations, by learning to recognize their effects on us, we can develop a deeper relationship with our environment and with our own bodies. When you find yourself experiencing unexplained emotions or sensations, you can pause and consider the possibility of infrasound. Rather than immediately attributing these experiences to supernatural causes or to your own neurosis, you can recognize them as potential responses to infrasound. This awareness does not diminish the reality or the intensity of your experience. Rather, it provides a framework for understanding your experience that is grounded in science and in the material world. Simultaneously, we can recognize that even though infrasound operates through physical mechanisms, the experiences it generates are real and meaningful. The sense of awe and transcendence that you feel in a sacred space is not diminished by the knowledge that infrasound is contributing to that experience. The fear that you feel in a supposedly haunted location is not less real because it is triggered by infrasound rather than by a visible threat. The physical and the psychological, the material and the spiritual, are not separate realms. They are aspects of a unified reality in which vibration and consciousness dance together. The invitation to deeper awareness. As we conclude this exploration, I want to invite you to a deeper awareness of the vibrations that move through your life. Pay attention to how different spaces make you feel. Notice which locations trigger fear or unease, and which trigger peace or transcendence. Become aware of the subtle sensations in your body, the vibrations of your heart, the movement of your breath, the tingling of your skin. Listen to the low frequencies in music and in your environment. Begin to sense the infrasound that is constantly present around you, even though you cannot consciously hear it. This deeper awareness is not something that requires special equipment or scientific training. It is simply a matter of paying attention, of becoming more sensitive to the subtle signals that your body is constantly receiving. As you develop this awareness, you may find that your experience of the world becomes richer and more nuanced. You may begin to understand your emotions and your reactions in new ways. You may find that certain spaces and experiences take on new meanings and new significance. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the invisible world of infrasound. If this experience has brought you a deeper understanding of how the material world shapes your inner experience, I would appreciate a like and a subscription to the Relaxing Science channel. Also, let us know if you would like to see more content exploring the connections between science, consciousness, and the mysteries of human experience. Share with us your own experiences with spaces that feel haunted or sacred, with emotions that seem to arise without obvious cause, with sensations that move you in ways you cannot fully explain. As you move forward from this exploration, carry with you the knowledge that you are constantly surrounded by vibrations, that these vibrations are shaping your experience in profound ways, and that by becoming aware of these vibrations, you can develop a deeper, richer relationship with the world and with yourself. The frequencies that move us are not separate from who we are. They are part of the fabric of our existence, the physical basis of our consciousness, the vibrations through which the universe expresses itself through us. In the end, infrasound reminds us of a profound truth that we are not isolated consciousness trapped in bodies separate from the material world. Rather, we are intimately connected to the world around us, constantly exchanging vibrations and frequencies with our environment, constantly being shaped by and shaping the vibrations that move through the world. By recognizing this connection, by becoming aware of the vibrations that move through us, we can find a deeper peace, a more profound sense of belonging to the world, and a more authentic understanding of what it means to be human in a universe of infinite vibration and infinite possibility. The vibrations continue, flowing through all things, connecting all beings, reminding us that we are part of something vast and mysterious and beautiful. Listen to these vibrations. Feel them moving through your body. Allow them to move your heart and your mind. And in this listening, in this feeling, in this allowing, you may discover a peace and a presence that transcends understanding, a connection to the infinite that moves through all things, including you.